The courtroom buzzed with nervous energy, a stark contrast to the almost unbearable silence that had permeated the small town of Havenwood, Ohio, for the past 6 months. Daniel Hayes, a local high school history teacher and beloved soccer coach, sat at the defense table, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. He was accused of the unthinkable, the brutal murder of Sarah Miller, a bright, promising student whose life had been tragically cut short. Daniel, a man known for his gentle demeanor and unwavering dedication to his students, was an unlikely suspect. The emotional hook was the sheer incongruity of the accusation, the jarring image of this respected figure being painted as a monster. His wife, Emily, sat behind him, her face a mask of pale determination, her hand resting reassuringly on his back, a silent testament to her unwavering belief in his innocence. The town, once united in grief over Sarah's death, was now fractured, a bitter divide separating those who believed in Daniel's innocence and those who saw him as a cold-blooded killer. The prosecution's case, built largely on circumstantial evidence and the testimony of a single, somewhat unreliable witness, painted a damning picture. They spoke of Daniel's alleged inappropriate relationship with Sarah, fueled by misinterpreted text messages and fleeting glances. They highlighted his presence near the crime scene on the night of the murder, a fact Daniel readily admitted. He'd been taking his nightly walk, a routine he'd followed for years. The suspense built with each piece of seemingly innocuous evidence twisted into something sinister. Each of Daniel's familiar traits, his quiet intensity, his dedication, reinterpreted as the hallmarks of a predator. The dramatic irony was thick. The town, blinded by grief and the sensationalism of the media, seemed eager to find a culprit, their collective judgment swayed by fear and speculation. They saw a monster in their midst, failing to recognize the gentle man they had known for years, the man who had shaped their children's lives. Even Sarah's parents, consumed by unimaginable pain, clung to prosecution's narrative, their grief finding a focal point in Daniel. As the trial progressed, a major power shift began to unfold. Daniel's defense attorney, a sharp, tenacious woman named Eleanor Vance, methodically dismantled the prosecution's case. She exposed the inconsistencies in the witnesses' testimony, highlighting their history of drug use and unreliable memory. She presented evidence of Daniel's strong character, his impeccable record, and the deep respect he held within the community. Eleanor also introduced a crucial piece of evidence that had been initially overlooked: security footage from a convenience store near Sarah's home, time-stamped just minutes after Daniel was seen walking the opposite direction. The grainy footage showed a dark SUV speeding away from the area, a vehicle that didn't belong to Daniel. The revelation cast a shadow of doubt over the entire prosecution's case, a glimmer of hope in the suffocating darkness. The suspense intensified as Eleanor meticulously pieced together an alternative theory, suggesting that Sarah's murder was linked to a series of unsolved burglaries in the area, crimes that had escalated in violence in recent weeks. She presented evidence of Sarah's family owning valuable antiques, items that could have made them a target. The focus of suspicion began to subtly shift, the neatly constructed narrative of the prosecution beginning to unravel. The life lesson began to crystallize: the fallibility of human perception, the danger of jumping to conclusions in the face of tragedy, and the critical importance of due process and a fair trial. The case of Daniel Hayes served as a stark reminder that justice delayed is justice denied, but also that justice rushed can lead to the gravest of errors. The jury deliberated for days, the tension in Havenwood reaching a fever pitch. Finally, the verdict was read: not guilty. A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. Emily sobbed with relief, clutching Daniel's hand. The town was stunned, the swift certainty of guilt now replaced by a hesitant uncertainty. Justice, it seemed, had been served, the innocent man exonerated. But as Daniel and Emily embraced outside the courthouse, a figure emerged from the crowd: Sarah's father, his face a mask of inconsolable grief and simmering rage. He clutched a worn photograph of Sarah, his eyes fixed on Daniel with an unwavering intensity. He spoke, his voice low and trembling, a single sentence that cut through the celebratory air like a knife. The real killer is still out there, Hayes, and I will find them. The suspense hung heavy in the air. Had justice truly been served, or was this just the beginning of another, more personal quest for vengeance? The dark SUV remained unidentified, the true circumstances of Sarah's murder still shrouded in mystery, and the raw, untamed grief of a father vowed a reckoning that could shatter the fragile peace that had just been restored to Havenwood. The weight of the not guilty verdict settled unevenly upon Havenwood. For some, it was a sigh of relief, a confirmation of their long-held belief in Daniel's innocence. For others, those whose grief had solidified into a conviction of his guilt, it was a bitter pill, a perceived failure of the justice system. The celebratory atmosphere outside the courthouse was thin, overshadowed by the raw anguish emanating from Sarah Miller's parents. Daniel and Emily returned to their quiet home, the relief of the verdict tempered by the lingering shadow of suspicion that still clung to Daniel. The whispers hadn't entirely ceased. The averted gazes in the grocery store, the hushed conversations that fell silent as they approached. These were constant reminders that for many, the question of Daniel's guilt remained unresolved. Sheriff Landry, despite the jury's decision, felt a persistent unease. The dark SUV remained a phantom, a crucial piece of the puzzle that refused to fit. He couldn't shake the feeling that justice, while legally satisfied, might not have been truly served. He quietly continued his own inquiries, revisiting the unsolved burglaries Eleanor Vance had mentioned, looking for any connection, any thread that might link them to Sarah's murder. Agent Kennedy, having observed the trial with a detached professional interest, also remained in Havenwood. The inconsistencies in the initial investigation, the almost too convenient focus on Daniel, had raised red flags. She saw a community eager for closure, perhaps too eager, potentially overlooking crucial details in their rush to find culprit. Her team began a parallel investigation, meticulously re-examining the crime scene, interviewing witnesses who had been previously dismissed, and delving deeper into Sarah's life. A significant twist emerged from Agent Kennedy's team's efforts. They uncovered Sarah's secret online life, a world far removed from the bright, promising student known to Havenwood. Sarah had been involved in a clandestine online forum dedicated to buying and selling of rare and valuable antiques, the very kind her family owned. This revelation cast a new light on Eleanor Vance's theory about the burglaries, suggesting that Sarah herself might have been involved, perhaps unknowingly, in something dangerous. Further investigation into Sarah's online activities revealed a series of encrypted messages with an unknown user, discussing a big deal and expressing fear of being double-crossed. The messages, though cryptic, hinted at a risky transaction involving a particularly valuable antique music box owned by the Miller family, an item that had been reported missing shortly after Sarah's death, but dismissed as a potential robbery target by the local police. This discovery introduced a new layer of complexity, shifting the narrative away from Daniel and toward a potential motive involving greed, betrayal, and a dangerous online underworld. Had Sarah's secret life led to her demise? Had she been targeted by someone she met online, someone involved in the high-stakes world of antique dealing? Another twist unfolded when Sheriff Landry, pursuing his own leads, discovered that the dark SUV seen near Sarah's house on the night of the murder had been rented from an agency over 2 hours away. The same agency where a car had been rented by a known associate of notorious antique thief named Victor the Collector Martel. Martel had a reputation for ruthlessness and a penchant for disappearing without a trace after his heists. The pieces began to click into place, forming a chillingly different picture. Sarah, involved in a risky online deal involving her family's antique music box, had likely been targeted by Martel and his associate. Daniel's presence near the scene had been nothing more than a tragic coincidence, his quiet walk placing him in the wrong place at the wrong time, making him an easy target for suspicion in a town desperate for answers. The dramatic irony deepened. The community, so quick to condemn Daniel, had been blind to the real danger lurking in the shadows, a danger connected to a hidden world operating just beneath their peaceful existence. The justice they thought they had witnessed in Daniel's acquittal now felt incomplete, the true perpetrators still at large. Agent Kennedy and Sheriff Landry joined forces, their investigations converging on Victor Martel. They discovered Martel had a history of using secluded locations as temporary hideouts, often favoring remote cabins and abandoned properties. A new, urgent search began, focusing on areas Martel was known to frequent. Meanwhile, Daniel and Emily attempted to rebuild their lives, the cloud of suspicion slowly beginning to dissipate. But the relief was fragile, overshadowed by the knowledge that Sarah's killer was still free, a dangerous predator who could strike again. Then, a break in the case. A local resident, an elderly woman who lived on the outskirts of town, reported seeing a dark SUV matching the description near an abandoned logging cabin several miles outside of Havenwood, just days after Sarah's murder. She also recalled seeing two figures near the cabin, one tall and gaunt, the other shorter and stockier, a description that matched Martell and his known associate, a man named Cyril. As Agent Kennedy and Sheriff Landry's team converged on a remote logging cabin, a sense of tense anticipation filled the air. Justice, it seemed, was finally within reach. They surrounded the cabin, their weapons drawn, prepared for a confrontation. But as they breached the door, they found the cabin empty. The only sign of recent occupancy was a single, antique music box sitting on a dusty table, its intricate carvings eerily familiar. The Miller family's missing heirloom. And beneath the music box, a crudely drawn map depicting a series of winding paths leading deep into the dense, unforgiving Blackwood National Forest. At the end of one of the paths, a single word was scrawled in what appeared to be fresh ink: Kennedy. The suspense hung heavy in the silent cabin. The taunting message, the personal address to Agent Kennedy, sent a chill through the room. Martell and Cyril were still out there, deeper in the wilderness, and they knew they were being hunted. This wasn't just about justice for Sarah anymore. It had become a dangerous game, a personal vendetta orchestrated by a cunning and ruthless killer. The crudely drawn map, bearing Agent Kennedy's name, felt like a cold hand gripping the investigation. It was a brazen taunt, a clear indication that Victor Martell and Cyril weren't just fleeing. They were leading them into a trap. The Blackwood National Forest, a sprawling wilderness of dense foliage and treacherous terrain, became the new battleground. Agent Kennedy, her face grim, recognized the shift. This was no longer solely about bringing Sarah's killers to justice. It had become a personal challenge. Martell, emboldened by his escape and fueled by a perverse sense of superiority, was playing a dangerous game. She wouldn't let him win. The search intensified, the FBI and local law enforcement combing the Blackwood, their every step fraught with the potential for ambush. Christopher, his grief now sharpened by a burning desire for retribution, insisted on joining the search party, his intimate knowledge of the forest proving invaluable in navigating its hidden trails and identifying potential hideouts. Days turned into a grueling cat-and-mouse chase. The only clues were occasional tracks, discarded supplies, and the unsettling feeling of being watched. Martell and Cyril were seasoned criminals, adept at moving through the wilderness undetected. The antique music box, recovered from the cabin, became a silent symbol of Sarah's stolen life, a constant reminder of their failure to apprehend her killers sooner. Then came a breakthrough. A thermal imaging drone, deployed over a particularly dense section of the forest, detected a faint heat signature emanating from a hidden cave system, one not marked on any map. It was a long shot, but it was their only lead. As the team, led by Agent Kennedy and accompanied by a determined Christopher, cautiously entered the cave system, the air grew heavy and damp. The silence was broken only by the drip of water and the echo of their own footsteps. The darkness seemed to press in on them, amplifying the tension. The caves opened into a large subterranean chamber, illuminated by a flickering lantern. And there they were, Victor Martell, his gaunt face illuminated by the flickering light, and Cyril, his stocky frame tense and alert. Between them, secured to a rough-hewn wooden post, was a figure, not Evelyn, but another young woman, her eyes wide with terror, bearing a striking resemblance to Sarah. The twist was horrifying. Sarah hadn't been their only victim. The big deal she had been discussing online wasn't just about antiques. It was about luring other young women with valuable heirlooms into their trap. Martell and Cyril weren't just thieves. They were predators, their greed intertwined with chilling pattern of abduction and likely murder. A tense standoff ensued. Martell, a cruel smile twisting his lips, held a knife to the young woman's throat. "Welcome, Agent Kennedy," he sneered, his voice echoing through the cavern. "Looks like you found our little storage facility." Christopher, His grief momentarily eclipsed by a surge of righteous anger, lunged forward, but Agent Kennedy held him back. This had to be handled carefully. The life of another innocent person hung in the balance. The dramatic irony was stark. The vast, seemingly indifferent wilderness, a place of natural beauty, had concealed this horrifying underground prison, a testament to darkness that could fester unseen, even in the heart of freedom. The justice they had sought for Sarah now extended to another potential victim. The stakes raised even higher. A fierce negotiation ensued, Agent Kennedy using all her skills to try and buy time, to create an opening. Meanwhile, Christopher, his eyes locked on Martel, noticed a subtle detail, a loose rock above Martel's head. In a swift, coordinated move, as Agent Kennedy created a diversion, Christopher dislodged the rock. It crashed down, striking Martel off balance. In the ensuing chaos, the knife fell and the FBI team moved in, subduing Martel and Cyril. The young woman was freed, her terror slowly giving way to relief. Justice in this instance was brutal but decisive. Martel and Cyril, their reign of terror in the Blackwood finally over, were taken into custody. The full extent of their crimes, the number of young lives they had extinguished, would likely never be fully known. The final scene showed Christopher and Agent Kennedy standing outside the cave entrance, the rising sun casting long shadows across the forest floor. The rescued young woman was being airlifted to safety. A sense of grim satisfaction settled over them. Justice for Sarah, though delayed and hard-fought, had finally been served, not just in Daniel's exoneration, but in the capture of her true killers and the prevention of further tragedy. The life lesson resonated deeply. Evil often hides in plain sight, masked by normalcy and greed. True justice requires unwavering persistence, a willingness to look beyond easy answers, and the courage to confront the darkness, no matter how deeply it is concealed. But as they prepared to leave the Blackwood, a local law enforcement officer approached Agent Kennedy, his face pale. He held up a small, tarnished silver locket, identical to the one Christopher had found near the disturbed earth where Sarah was initially believed to be buried. This one, however, was engraved with a different set of initials, and clutched tightly within it was a faded photograph of another young woman, her face hauntingly familiar, a face that had been missing for over a decade from a neighboring county. The suspense hung heavy in the morning air. Martel and Cyril were in custody, but the discovery of the second locket suggested a far longer and more extensive history of violence. The storage facility in the cave might not have been their only one. The darkness in Blackwood, it seemed, ran deeper still. The pursuit of true justice, the full accounting for all the lost lives, was far from over. The end